In a city built on sunshine and laughter, darkness waited patiently beneath palm trees. It learned how to bleed. A suitcase of bones near a Georgia border. A nightclub pulsing with screams instead of music. A woman's last breath sealed beneath duct tape. And a home on Smithfield Drive echoing with gunfire and betrayal. Each scene, a fracture in Orlando's smile, proof that paradise can rot from within. Now, decades behind bars can't restore what was lost, but remembering ensures the silence never wins. And this is Every Male Killer Who Terrorized Orlando, Florida. Names, motives, and missed warnings. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Jorge Quintero. In a crime that spanned 3 states, investigators followed a trail of blood, phone pings, and surveillance footage to uncover one of Florida's most disturbing murder cases. Jorge Javier Quintero, a 41-year-old man from Argentina, was living in Orlando, Florida, with his girlfriend, 29-year-old teacher Carmen Elsa Escalante Carrera. They had been preparing to move into a new apartment in Alafaya when everything unraveled in late October 2024. On the morning of October 29, Quintero sent suicidal text messages to his ex-wife and friends, prompting concern. When deputies arrived at his Marabou Circle residence for a welfare check, they found blood throughout the home, a broken knife, and several handwritten suicide notes. Carrera was missing. Detectives began piecing together her last known movements. Door camera footage from the couple's new apartment showed activity ending the previous evening. Quintero had rented a white Dodge Ram truck from Enterprise 2 days earlier, which he never returned. As police processed the Orlando scene, cell tower data showed the victim's phone traveling north. By afternoon, it pinged in Seminole County, Georgia, over 300 miles away. Investigators realized Quintero was on the move, carrying evidence of the crime. Law enforcement agencies across multiple states joined the manhunt. Highway license plate readers detected the rental truck crossing into Alabama. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force began surveillance in Saraland, outside Mobile. On October 31, they located Quintero in a shopping center parking lot. When officers moved in, he opened fire. A brief shootout followed, leaving him critically wounded. That same day, Georgia investigators found a discarded suitcase near a wooded area close to the state line. Inside were human remains later confirmed through dental records to be those of Carmen Carrera. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled with a power cord and stabbed repeatedly. Evidence of dismemberment was clear. One arm was severed and packed separately in the same suitcase, while deep cuts showed an attempt to remove additional limbs. Forensic specialists matched the bloody knife from Quintero's Orlando home to the victim's wounds. The brutality of the killing and the calculated disposal of the body led authorities to classify the crime as premeditated first-degree murder. Detectives traced Quintero's route using digital breadcrumbs, credit card receipts, gas purchases from the victim's bank account, and security cameras from convenience stores along Interstate 75. Every detail reinforced a timeline of escape and attempted concealment. After being released from an Alabama hospital, Quintero was extradited to Florida on the 25th of November, 2024, and booked into the Orange County Jail without bond. In early court appearances, prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder and fraudulent use of personal information. His defense claimed he had no memory of the events, but the evidence, rental records, phone data, and forensic proof, was overwhelming. Quintero remains incarcerated awaiting trial. Carrera's family has asked for privacy as they grieve. Across Florida, her story became a warning that even the most ordinary relationships can hide unthinkable violence. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Omar Matee. Under the neon lights of Pulse nightclub, what began as a night of music and joy turned into one of the darkest mass shootings in U.S. history. Omar Matee, a 29-year-old security guard from Fort Pierce, Florida, walked into Pulse in the early hours of the 12th of June 2016. Armed with a semi-automatic rifle and a 9mm pistol, he opened fire on the crowded dance floor, killing 49 people and injuring 58 more within minutes. Most of the victims were young, many of Hispanic and Puerto Rican descent. Matee, a U.S. citizen born to Afghan parents in New York, had pledged allegiance to ISIS during a 911 call made amid the chaos, claiming his act was revenge for American airstrikes in the Middle East. The attack began at 2:02 a.m. when Matee entered the club and began shooting indiscriminately. Within 2 minutes, he exchanged gunfire with an off-duty Orlando police officer, forcing patrons to flee or hide in bathrooms. As backup units arrived, Matee retreated into the restroom area, taking dozens of hostages. Over the next 3 hours, he made several 911 calls and spoke with negotiators, falsely claiming he had bombs and vests strapped to hostages. Law enforcement later determined these threats were part of his plan to prolong the standoff. Inside, terrified survivors texted friends and family for help. SWAT officers surrounded the building, while tactical teams prepared for a potential detonation. At 5:02 a.m., after hearing more gunfire inside, authorities used an armored Bearcat vehicle to breach the wall of the club. A brief firefight erupted as Matee tried to charge through the hole he had made his final stand. By 5:14 a.m., he was shot and killed. Police pronounced him dead at 5:17 a.m. The investigation was immediate and exhaustive. The FBI took command, categorizing the event as both a terrorist attack and a hate crime. More than 500 interviews were conducted, and over 950 pieces of evidence were analyzed, including Matee's firearms, cell phone, and computer data. Investigators discovered that he had legally purchased the weapons days earlier and had scouted multiple Orlando locations, including Disney Springs. His search history showed fascination with previous mass shooters and ISIS propaganda. Matee had been questioned by the FBI in 2013 and 2014 for suspected extremist links, but was cleared after insufficient evidence. Agents later found no proof that he was directed by ISIS. Rather, he appeared to have self-radicalized online. Forensic tests from his autopsy showed steroid use, and testimony from his first wife revealed a pattern of domestic abuse and volatility. The Pulse tragedy prompted nationwide grief and policy debate. Matee's wife, Noor Salman, was tried for aiding and abetting terrorism but was acquitted in 2018 after evidence showed she was not aware of his plan. In the heart of Orlando, Pulse stands as a permanent reminder of how hate and extremism can destroy even the most joyous places. Number 3. Bruce Whitehead. His forehead bore the word sacrifice, but what Bruce Wayne Whitehead offered the world was only pain, violence, and fear. Whitehead, a 55-year-old registered sex offender from Florida, had spent nearly his entire life under state supervision for violent sexual crimes. In December 2022, just months after being released from civil commitment, he committed one of the most brutal attacks in recent memory, a kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder that mirrored his crimes from nearly 40 years earlier. The events began when Whitehead approached a woman near the Florida Mall in Orange County, Florida. He offered her $850 to paint her for an hour. Trusting his story, the woman agreed and entered his car. They stopped at a convenience store, where he purchased her a bottle of water before driving to a wooded area in Pine Hills. Once there, Whitehead pulled a knife, dragged her from the car, and began a horrifying assault. He stripped her, sexually battered her, and mutilated her body, biting her breast and burning her skin with cigarettes. As he attempted to stab her in the chest, his knife slipped, giving her a fleeting chance to escape. Bleeding and terrified, she ran toward a nearby subdivision and flagged down a driver who called police. Detectives quickly began piecing together what had happened. With the victim's help, they identified the vehicle, which had been borrowed from a friend. That friend named Whitehead, a recently released sex offender, as the driver. Within days, his photo, with the unmistakable tattoo stretching across his forehead, was circulated to the public. The lead that broke the case came from an alert citizen who spotted him in the area. On the 15th of December 2022, after a 5-day manhunt, police arrested Whitehead. DNA testing confirmed his involvement, evidence so definitive that even his own defense conceded it was irrefutable. The brutality of the crime shocked even veteran investigators. Prosecutors revealed that Whitehead's 1,986 conviction in Duval County involved nearly identical acts: kidnapping, sexual battery, and knife violence against a woman he didn't know. Psychiatrists had previously labeled him a sexually violent predator, but he was released in 2022 after doctors determined he no longer posed a threat. In court, he questioned his sanity, telling the judge that trying to eat someone was not the act of a rational mind. The trial in Orange County concluded in July 2024. The jury found Whitehead guilty on all counts: sexual battery with a deadly weapon, attempted first-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, and aggravated assault. He was sentenced to life in prison. During sentencing, prosecutors emphasized that his release had been a failure of the system. Law enforcement officials across Florida echoed the concern. The victim, who testified through tears, said she fought to survive for her young son. Her strength and courage became the case's lasting image, overshadowing the brutality that nearly ended her life. Today, Bruce Whitehead sits behind bars for the rest of his life, a reminder that some predators can never truly be set free. Number 4. Anthony Shea. Behind the badge and the uniform, one Florida lawman hid a secret so dark it would destroy his own family forever. Anthony John Shea, 49, had served with the Orange County Sheriff's Office since 2006. His wife, Lieutenant Elowolda Ellie Shea, 39, was also a respected member of the same department. Their marriage, however, had been crumbling. Reports revealed years of domestic strife, infidelity, and allegations of abuse. In August 2024, Anthony resigned from the force amid an internal investigation into an affair he'd had while on duty. Just 2 months later, Ellie was dead. On the night of the 13th of October 2024, the couple argued for hours inside their home. Investigators later determined that the argument revolved around Anthony's affair and Ellie's insistence on divorce. By the next afternoon, digital records placed Ellie's phone active at 12:46 p.m. when she searched online for "I'm a cop and my husband sexually assaulted me." Roughly 45 minutes later, a text message was sent from her phone to Anthony saying, "I can't do this anymore." Police now believe Anthony sent that message himself to create the illusion of a suicide note. Seconds after the text was sent, an audio recording automatically began on Ellie's phone, lasting 54 minutes. It captured silence, light household noises, and Anthony's voice telling his children their mother was asleep. Investigators concluded that Ellie had already been shot at that point. Around 2 p.m., Anthony took his daughters to a nearby Publix grocery store, allegedly to build an alibi, then returned home and called 911, reporting that his wife had shot herself. When detectives arrived, they found Ellie lying in the bedroom, a single gunshot wound to her head, the firearm neatly placed across her chest. But inconsistencies surfaced almost immediately. Anthony's account of events changed repeatedly, and his demeanor appeared rehearsed. Crime scene specialists recovered his DNA on the gun's trigger, despite his claim that he never touched the weapon. Further forensic analysis of the home's smart lock and cell data revealed a timeline inconsistent with his story. The audio recording on Ellie's phone, found later by investigators, became the turning point. Detectives also uncovered a troubling history. Ellie had once sought a protection order in 2012, alleging her husband threatened to have her assaulted. Just weeks before her death, she suspected he had drugged her under the pretense of giving vitamins. These findings, combined with the staged scene and fabricated messages, led to Anthony's arrest on the 18th of October 2024. He was charged with first-degree murder with a firearm. In court, prosecutors argued the evidence pointed to deliberate staging and concealment. His attorney, Mark O'Mara, countered that detectives had built a case on assumptions. The court denied bond, citing risk and severity. And Anthony remains held in the Orange County Jail awaiting trial. The case left a scar on the agency tasked with investigating one of its own, a tragedy where betrayal and deception shattered the thin blue line inside a family home. Number 5. Scott Nelso. He walked into her world like a shadow, carrying duct tape, zip ties, and a deadly plan that would end an innocent life. Scott Edward Nelson, a 53-year-old career criminal, had spent years in and out of prisons across Florida. In September 2017, while on federal probation, he crossed paths with Jennifer Lynn Fulford, a 56-year-old nanny and house manager known in Winter Park for her kindness and devotion to the family she worked for. To Nelson, she was a stranger. To the people who loved her, she was irreplaceable. Within 3 days, she would vanish without a trace. On the 27th of September 2017, Nelson arrived at the home where Fulford worked, posing as a delivery man. Using a UPS package as his cover, he forced his way inside, bound Fulford's hands with zip ties, and demanded her bank PIN. He then wrapped her in a comforter and drove her in her own SUV to several ATMs, withdrawing $300. Surveillance footage later captured him making the withdrawal, his image clear enough for investigators to recognize him from prior federal supervision records. Afterward, Nelson took her to a wooded area in southwest Orange County, covered her face entirely with duct tape, and stabbed her 7 times, twice in the heart. Fulford's SUV was discovered the next day in an Orlando parking lot, abandoned with signs of a struggle inside. Detectives quickly traced the ATM activity and recognized Nelson from the footage. The same day, her employer reported her missing after she failed to pick up a child from school. On September 30, search teams found her body in a wooded lot off Apopka Vineland Road. She had suffocated beneath the duct tape before the fatal stabbing. Nelson was arrested on October 1 at a Jacksonville Amtrak station. He later said he allowed them to catch him, claiming he had nowhere left to go. During questioning, he confessed to the murder, describing it as collateral damage in his personal war against his probation officer. Investigators recovered his DNA on a beer bottle and a wristwatch from the SUV, leaving no doubt of his guilt. The 2019 trial exposed Nelson's disturbing personality. He took the stand to admit everything, speaking with unnerving calmness as he blamed the federal system for making him homeless. He told the jury he had purchased duct tape and zip ties in advance, planning to rob someone for money to flee supervision. Prosecutors emphasized the brutality, the suffocation, the stabbing, the calculated deception, while defense attorneys argued for mental instability, citing brain injuries and declining cognition. After deliberation, the jury found Nelson guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, and carjacking. The vote for death was not unanimous, so the court imposed life imprisonment without parole. The victim's family did not attend sentencing, but issued a statement remembering Jennifer as a light extinguished too soon. Nelson remains in a Florida prison, his name etched in infamy as the remorseless killer who turned a random encounter into a calculated act of terror against one of Winter Park's most cherished citizens. Number 6. Jason Wilfredo Rosario. Under the dim lights of an Orlando dive bar, a simple argument over a few drinks spiraled into a brutal act of violence. Jason Wilfredo Rosario, a 30-year-old bartender known by the nickname Saucy, was working a late shift at Grumpy's Underground Bar on the 31st of August 2025. The night was winding down when a disagreement over a bar tab erupted between Rosario and a customer. What began as a dispute over dollars quickly turned into a clash of tempers, fueled by alcohol, ego, and rage. Witnesses said the argument started shortly after 5:30 a.m. When the customer complained about being charged for drinks he claimed he never received. Although a manager stepped in to settle the issue, Rosario continued to taunt the patron. He made crude comments about the man's deceased mother, escalating the tension even further. After storming away, he returned moments later and challenged the customer to take the fight outside. Behind the bar, in a narrow alleyway dimly lit by security lights, the confrontation turned violent. The patron, accompanied by a friend, followed Rosario outside. Words were exchanged, then fists. The victim punched Rosario, knocking him to the ground. But as they struggled on the pavement, Rosario reached into his pocket, pulled out a knife, and began stabbing. The victim was struck 10 times, 7 times in the back, 3 in the head, including wounds to his jaw and ear. Rosario fled the scene as the victim, unaware of the full extent of his injuries, staggered back into the bar before collapsing. At 5:36 a.m., a woman with blood on her hands flagged down officers at North Mills Avenue and Canton Street. Paramedics arrived quickly, rushing the victim to the hospital in critical condition. Detectives secured the scene, marking blood trails and collecting the knife left behind in the alley. The investigation unfolded rapidly. The bar owner, Amanda Fields, identified Rosario as the suspect, providing his full name and nickname to police. Surveillance footage and witness statements corroborated the sequence of events. The victim, once stabilized, later identified Rosario in a photo lineup. During the initial search, Rosario called the bar's phone to speak with the owner, only for an officer to answer and tell him to return. Instead, he disappeared for several days. On the 5th of September 2025, detectives obtained a warrant and arrested Rosario without incident. Described by his employer as hot-headed and not a good fit, he had already been scheduled to be let go. Prosecutors charged him with attempted second-degree murder, citing the excessive number of stab wounds and his decision to lure the victim outside. Rosario was denied bond and remains in the Orange County Jail awaiting trial. The bar has since distanced itself from the incident, calling it a tragedy that never should have happened. In a city known for nightlife and music, Grumpy's Underground became the latest reminder of how a single argument, a few words too many, can ignite into irreversible violence. Number 7. Richard Raciak. He claimed it was self-defense. The evidence showed otherwise, 4 bullets fired into the back of a woman who was walking away. Richard Raciak, a 48-year-old Florida man, lived in a quiet home on Smithfield Drive with his longtime girlfriend, 46-year-old Allison Sheehan, and their young son. To outsiders, they seemed like a normal family. But behind closed doors, their relationship had become strained, marked by arguments and tension. On the night of the 15th of April 2023, that tension would turn deadly during what was supposed to be a simple celebration, their son's birthday. That evening, friends and relatives gathered for the party. After Raciak's father left around 3:30 p.m., the night took a darker turn. By 10:30 p.m., Raciak began texting his father, claiming that Sheehan was drunk and attacking him. Shortly after midnight, a series of messages followed, growing more erratic. Then came the one that would later define the case: "I had to put her down." Minutes later, a photo appeared on his father's phone, an image of Sheehan's lifeless body. When deputies arrived just after 12:30 a.m., they found Sheehan lying in the master bedroom, shot 4 times in the back. Raciak was at the scene, dehydrated and visibly shaken. He told officers he had acted in self-defense, alleging that Sheehan had clawed at his eyes and pushed him into a dresser. He said he only wanted to shoot her in the leg to make her chill, but admitted he had aimed high. Investigators quickly noticed inconsistencies. Sheehan was unarmed, walking away when the shots were fired. Detectives recovered a .40 caliber handgun from a biometric safe beside the bed, the same weapon Raciak had accessed moments before the shooting. Forensic analysis confirmed 4 rounds had been fired at close range, all entering her back. Text messages sent to his family further undermined his claim of fear or panic. One asked his father and brother to retrieve money from his safe before police arrived, suggesting calm premeditation rather than chaos. Raciak was taken to the hospital for dehydration before being booked into the Orange County Jail. He did not resist arrest and waived his rights during interrogation, providing a detailed account that aligned with the forensic evidence but contradicted his self-defense claim. Detectives concluded that the shooting followed an argument rather than an immediate threat to his life. In December 2024, facing overwhelming evidence, Raciak pleaded guilty to second-degree murder with a firearm. Judge Barbara J. Leach sentenced him in February 2025 to 25 years to life in prison. The victim's brother, Dennis Castanis, publicly condemned the plea deal, calling it an injustice that the charge was reduced from first-degree murder. He described the family's grief as a wound that will never close. Raciak is now serving his sentence in a Florida state correctional facility. The home on Smithfield Drive stands silent, a reminder of how one night of rage turned a birthday celebration into a lifetime of loss. Number 8. David Tronnes. In a quiet Orlando neighborhood, a house once prepared for television fame became the center of a grim real crime story that stunned Florida. David Tronnes, a 49-year-old from Minnesota, moved to Orlando in 2013 after meeting Shanti Cooper online. He told her he was a millionaire who had inherited millions, but in reality, he was unemployed. Shanti, a successful business consultant, supported their lifestyle and the renovation of their 4,000-square-foot Victorian home. They married in 2017, planning to feature the renovation on the reality TV show Zombie House Flipping. But behind the promise of a dream home was a growing rift built on lies, debt, and obsession. By April 2018, their finances were collapsing. Shanti had discovered David's deception and his secret visits to men's bathhouses. On April 24, David called 911 claiming his wife had slipped and fallen in the bathtub. When first responders arrived at the Delaney Park home, they noticed something was wrong. The tub and the floor were completely dry. Shanti's hair was dry, her body cold, and there was no sign of drowning. David said he had been walking his dogs earlier, but his timeline didn't match the evidence. Detectives noted his calm demeanor and emotionless crying. Forensic investigators quickly found blood traces on the bed slats and carpet in the bedroom. The medical examiner concluded that Shanti had been beaten and strangled, not drowned. She suffered blunt force trauma to the head and died from asphyxiation. David had moved her body to the bathroom, trying to stage a slip and fall accident. Luminol testing revealed wiped bloodstains across the bedroom walls and baseboards. He had washed the sheets and cleaned the crime scene before calling for help. Detectives interrogated David for 14 hours, observing what they described as fake crying and a rehearsed tone. During the investigation, they found Shanti's missing $15,000 engagement ring hidden in a suitcase at David's mother's house. Financial audits revealed he had no inheritance and was living entirely off his wife's income. Digital forensics confirmed Shanti's phone had gone inactive the night before, and video evidence placed her alive 1 day earlier. Prosecutors later argued that David's motive was rooted in financial collapse and rage after Shanti refused to appear on the television show. David's actions on the day of the murder suggested premeditation. He left his phone in a cooler to prevent GPS tracking, staged the bathtub scene, and told neighbors he'd been cleaning the house. Forensic analysts reconstructed the sequence of events and determined that the killing had occurred hours before the emergency call. The trial in October 2023 lasted 1 week. Jurors deliberated for less than 5 hours before finding David Tronnes guilty of first-degree murder. He received a mandatory life sentence without parole. Shanti's family expressed quiet relief that justice had finally been served. Inside the once promising home, the silence remains heavy. What was meant to showcase success now stands as Florida's reminder that appearances can conceal the darkest truths. Number 9. Kelvis Rodriguez-Tormes. Under the dim lights of an Orlando drive-thru, a minor argument over a slow order spiraled into one of Florida's most senseless killings. Kelvis Rodriguez-Tormes, a 37-year-old convicted felon, arrived at a Burger King on East Colonial Drive after his girlfriend, Ashley Mason, complained about the long wait at the window. Moments earlier, Mason had argued with 22-year-old employee Desmond Joshua Jr., who was working his second day on the job. Frustrated, she demanded a refund and allegedly warned staff that she would return with her man. Minutes later, she did, accompanied by Rodriguez-Tormes in a white truck, both intent on confrontation. Security cameras captured the scene as Mason pointed at Joshua while shouting from her car. Rodriguez-Tormes exited his vehicle, challenged the young employee, and the two men moved into the parking lot. Witnesses reported seeing Rodriguez-Tormes put Joshua in a headlock, choking him until bystanders intervened. Joshua broke free, gasping for air, as his attacker walked calmly to his truck. A moment later, Rodriguez-Tormes returned, raised a firearm, and warned the victim that he had 2 seconds before he would shoot. The gun fired once, striking Joshua in front of horrified witnesses. The suspect fled the scene, leaving behind a crowd in shock and an employee dying near the restaurant's back door. Deputies from the Orange County Sheriff's Office arrived within minutes. Paramedics attempted to resuscitate Joshua, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives immediately began gathering forensic and digital evidence. Surveillance footage from the restaurant's cameras confirmed the sequence of events, including Mason's return and Rodriguez-Tormes' physical assault. Witnesses identified both individuals and described the shooter's white truck. Investigators later located the vehicle, and inside, they found materials suggesting attempts to conceal evidence. The murder weapon, however, was missing. In a subsequent interview, Mason admitted to bringing Rodriguez-Tormes back to the restaurant after the dispute. She was charged as a principal to first-degree murder and for aggravated assault with a firearm. Detectives learned that after fleeing, Rodriguez-Tormes dismantled the gun and hid it. Police later recovered the weapon's parts, along with ammunition, during a search operation. Forensic analysis matched the fragments to the bullet retrieved from the victim's body. Rodriguez-Tormes' criminal history quickly surfaced. Records revealed a 2005 conviction for possession of a controlled substance and an existing firearm prohibition as a convicted felon. The discovery strengthened the prosecution's argument for premeditation, as he had no legal right to carry or discharge a weapon. His actions, leaving the scene to retrieve the gun, returning to the location, and delivering a verbal countdown before firing, formed the basis of a deliberate act under Florida law. In August 2020, Rodriguez-Tormes was charged with first-degree murder with a firearm, destruction of evidence, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He was held without bond. The killing lasted less than 2 minutes, yet its impact endures. In the drive-thru where tempers flared, silence now marks the cost of one man's anger and another's stolen future. Number 10. Ralph Hensel. In Winter Garden, Florida, a quiet apartment complex became the backdrop for a premeditated killing that would shock the community and reignite debate about vigilante violence. Ralph Francis Hensel, a 57-year-old resident of the Bay Point Apartments, had long been irritated by the sound of motorcycles and ATVs echoing through the property. He lived with a leasing office manager and often complained about the noise, telling both neighbors and police that if officers didn't intervene, he would take matters into his own hands. On the afternoon of the 20th of February 2025, those words turned into deadly action. That day, around 3:50 p.m., residents heard the hum of an ATV driven by 32-year-old Joaquin Deshaun Williams, a father of 5 who lived in the same complex. According to investigators, Hensel walked from the leasing office, armed with a handgun, and moved behind a nearby building. Surveillance footage later showed him lying in wait, watching as Williams rode his ATV past the sidewalk. When Williams approached the bend near the leasing office, Hensel stepped from hiding, shouted something, and fired 2 shots that struck Williams in the back of the head. The sound of gunfire sent residents into panic. Witnesses saw Hensel lower his weapon and calmly return to the leasing office, where he reportedly announced that he had killed him. Officers from the Winter Garden Police Department arrived within minutes to find Williams lying next to his overturned ATV. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Hensel was detained immediately, and the firearm was recovered nearby. Detectives launched a full investigation into what they described as an intentional act of violence. Witnesses recalled Hensel's earlier threats and statements about taking action himself. Police records confirmed that since January 2025, they had received 4 calls about noise complaints from the complex, 2 of which originated from Hensel. The leasing office manager's 911 call that day included audio capturing Hensel in the background, saying, "That mother's dead." Investigators reviewed surveillance video, interviewed multiple residents, and processed the scene for ballistic evidence. Shell casings, the firearm, and trajectory analysis aligned with the theory that Hensel had positioned himself strategically before firing. Further examination revealed no physical confrontation or provocation from Williams. Detectives concluded the act was deliberate and motivated by frustration over ATV activity. New evidence gathered in late February strengthened the case, including statements confirming Hensel's intent to ambush the victim. On the 3rd of April 2025, an Orange County grand jury formally indicted Hensel for first-degree murder, citing the premeditated lying-in-wait element as proof of intent under Florida law. Hensel remains in the Orange County jail without bond, awaiting trial. The victim's family, represented by Crump, described Williams as a devoted father and non-confrontational man who loved his children. They have vowed to pursue both criminal justice and civil accountability. In a place built for community, silence now fills the air where engines once roared. What began as noise complaints ended in tragedy and a man's deadly decision to play judge, jury, and executioner. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes, it lives next door, smiling at you in line, serving your drink, or wearing a badge of trust. Orlando's killers remind us that beneath sunshine and theme parks lies a city that has seen too much darkness, obsession, rage, betrayal, and blood. But for every secret buried in the streets of Florida, there's a story waiting to be told and a lesson carved into its silence. If you want to uncover more cases like these, the untold, the unfiltered, the unsettling truths, make sure you subscribe to Justice Reversed and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next story before it breaks.